What's up guys, I'm here. So a lot of you were asking me to make a video on this particular interview of Craig Federighi, the Apple software chief, by the folks over at So here we are. In the interview, Craig was asked why Apple is keeping macOS exclusive to the Mac and has no plans to bring it to the iPad, despite the fact that the iPad can easily handle a desktop-class operating system like macOS. For those who don't know, there is a huge difference between iPadOS and macOS. The former is basically a glorified version of iOS, while the latter is a full-fledged desktop operating system. There are a lot of apps that are available on macOS that are not available on iPad, OS, and even the user interface is completely different with a dock and a desktop with icons just like Windows or Android. And since the hardware is quite capable, many users have been wondering why Apple is keeping macOS exclusive to the Mac. According to Craig, the reason is pretty simple. It's the ecosystem. He says that Apple intentionally makes the iPad and iPhone versions of their OS as different as possible, so that you can not seamlessly move an app from one platform to another. Here's what he said specifically. We purposely keep the versions of iOS and iPad as different as possible so that you cannot take an iOS app and just port it to iPadOS or iPadOS to iOS, because then they would not be optimized for either. He further clarifies that while the architecture is the same, the way the OS handles things is completely different. So if you were to take an iOS app and put it on iPadOS without making any changes, it would not be a very pleasant experience for the end user. With that said, he also admits that the current state of affairs is not ideal for developers, but it is the best way to ensure that users get the best possible experience in terms of performance and battery life. It is actually not the first time that a high-level Apple executive has come out to defend this decision. Back in 2019, Apple CEO Tim Cook said that iPadOS and macOS will remain separate to preserve the unique experience on each platform. Basically, Apple doesn't want to cannibalize one product with the other. They want the iPad to remain a standalone product with its own unique experience. Personally, I don't see a problem with this. In fact, I prefer it this way. The iPad is a fantastic tablet, and I don't want that to change. If I wanted a desktop experience, I would simply buy a MacBook. But hey, let me know what do you think about this down in the comments. Also, Apple recently released iOS 16.3 RC, and it brings a new feature to the lock screen that allows users to blur the background of the lock screen photo. Here's how it looks. Pretty cool, right? iOS 16.3 will be officially released to the public next week, and you can expect the same timeline for Mac 13.2 as well. Of course, for all the latest updates on everything Apple, stay tuned. And as always, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out.